comments to people. I mean, because I just tell it. I mean, I'm from New York. You know, you're from the East Coast. I can tell. You know, I just tell it like it is. You know, so I have my very handy box of Kleenex because it's like, you know, because sometimes you know what you're going to say is just really strong.
Right.
And I just
let
put
them
the
cry
Kleenex
and
there.
give them a tissue, right?
Yeah, but they are always so grateful to understand what is going on with them because there is this internal understanding that they can now heal.
Right. See,
I mean, have you experienced that in your work?
Yeah, there's so much to support what you're saying that, again, you see, part of the problem I realized was when I got into this work 30 years ago, I sent articles to medical journals. It came back saying it's interesting, but it's not appropriate for the medical journal. I sent them to where it was appropriate, you know, psychological stuff. It came back saying it's appropriate, but it's not interesting. We know all this. See, that's the tragic part, that as physicians, we're not trained to get into this other area of emotions, feelings, and a whole host of things, you see. I mean, this is an ad that was in the New England Journal of Medicine from Sandoz Pharmaceutical Company. I was depressed, unable to cope. I went to see my physician. He prescribed an antidepressant. Now I feel, you know, wonderful again. And I wrote them. I said, that's it. I'm depressed. My family's had a terrible tragedy. I go to my doctor. He doesn't even say, what's wrong? How can I help you? He just gives me a pill. And, see, you're going beyond that. What I learned is several simple things. One, what I always do with people is say, what are you experiencing? Not what's your diagnosis, but how would you describe what you're experiencing with this problem? And the words that pop out of them are always about their life. You know, when you talk about childhood, a woman with cancer said, failure. I said, how does failure fit your life? She said, well, my body's failed. I said, that is not my question. My question is, how does the word failure fit your life? She said, my parents committed suicide when I was a child, so I must have been a failure as a child. Then she started changing her life and seeking therapy, in a sense, for all that pain and how it had affected her life and fear of relationships and everything else. The other is that if you look back, I mean, just to cite some research, a psychologist, Bruno Klopfer, was given 24 personality profiles of cancer patients. 19 out of 24 times he predicted correctly whether they'd have a slow or fast-growing tumor. 4 times he was wrong. Once he said, I can't tell. And that's just from their personalities. Caroline Thomas, a psychiatrist at Johns Hopkins, had medical students fill out a personality profile and draw a picture of themselves, and then she looked them up in midlife. And she realized she could predict what diseases they were going to get, what part of the body they were going to get things in, and that included how they drew themselves as well as their personality, because both things, just so people understand, like if you drew yourself with no hands, you're more likely to have psychological problems. How do you get a grip? How do you reach out? That type of thing. So it was so symbolic. And she also said she didn't think cancer would have any relationship to emotions, but she was quite surprised to find a low closeness to parent profile in patients who are more likely to develop, you know, the medical students who are more likely to develop cancer. And
what was that? Low something to parents?
Low closeness to parents profile. Those were her words. In other words, they did not have a good relationship with their parents. And you see, here's a quote, because this really struck me, because of work I'm doing. This is a quote from a woman who was dressed in dark colors and totally belittled by her mother, and she never resolved the relationship. Her mother died. My mother's words were eating away at me and maybe gave me cancer. Now, to me, it's no surprise that this woman is then overweight. Even the word eating, see, how do you reward yourself? What do you become addicted to? Food. Now, what did she do when she got cancer? Yeah, she changed her lifestyle, eating habits, and dressed, as she said, in bright, happy colors. Because her mother only dressed her in black, brown, and navy, so nobody would notice her. See? So Biology of Belief, a book by Bruce Lipton, a geneticist, talks about up to the age of 6, a child's brainwave pattern is similar to that of somebody under hypnosis. And this is what I've seen, that your parents' words in those early years are hypnotic. I mean, I fortunately had parents and grandparents who loved me. Despite a lot of problems I had as a child, I was loved. after my birth. I can tell you about it if you're interested. But, see, if you're loved, you grow up with a very different feeling about the world. If you grow up without love, then you don't have self-worth, self-esteem. You become self-destructive, and studies show this, that if your parents loved you, well, go into an assisted living facility, talk to 80, 90, and 100-year-olds. Say, your parents love you. 95% say, oh, yeah, sure. And that's why they're still alive. Go to high school and ask, and they say no. Ask them to write a suicide note, and the kids have no trouble writing 3 to 5 pages. And I may add, just so people know, there are statistics, ages 10 to 14, the fourth leading cause of death is suicide. And 70% of high school students have contemplated suicide. So you begin to understand, if you don't grow up with self-worth, self-esteem, you're not stupid, you know, when you're self-destructive. And it's just how you feel about life and yourself. So those are things I try to do with people, too, is what I call reparent them. I try to let them know I love them, not their behavior, but them. And if I persist, I have seen them turn things around because I haven't rejected them as everybody else did, and they begin to realize they're worth something. And then I've got to give you a paraphrase of a line from East of Eden by John Steinbeck, because it explains all the headlines we're reading constantly today. He said, all of us experience rejection. And with rejection comes anger and the desire for revenge. And with revenge, guilt. And there is the story of mankind. So when you think of these kids walking into the high school, bang, 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 and then they commit suicide. And it's over and over. Or flying your plane into, you know, the Internal Revenue building, whatever it is. I mean, we've got to stop, you know, rejecting each other and depersonalizing. We've got to bring kids up with love. And then the whole world would be a wonderful place to live in.
Well, if we weren't all busy running around and trying to just keep our heads above water, you know, I've talked about this on the show before, but, you know, I remember as a kid watching the Jetsons, you know, it's like, well, I had to work 4 whole hours today, you know, and people are like, oh, we have all this technology, our life should be easier, and we should have all this free time to go golf or do what we want, and nobody has any time to do anything, and I feel bad for children because the parents don't have time for them. You know, both parents work.
Yeah, but you can still see, first of all, a quote, it's only work if there's someplace else you'd rather be. So as a surgeon, our 5 children were very mad at me because I'd come home and say, I'm on call tonight, I can't go out with you, I can't do things. And then one night I was coming home and they were all going out. I said, wait a minute, how come you have a right to leave when I'm home, but I don't have a right to be a surgeon? So they realized we each should have the freedom to use our life as we desired. But what did we do? Then we had family night. Thursday night, everybody went together to roller skate. You know, so it doesn't matter what you do that night, but that you have family time. And we would go on vacations together and spend time together. And that's what we need to do. But, you know, when somebody says, oh, wait, you're a doctor, wait a minute. That's what makes me happy. I want to be that. See? So you want to do what makes you happy, we need to both have the same rights. And then they began to understand that it wasn't they could control me, but I couldn't tell them what to do, you know, that type of thing. And the rules have to apply both ways. But the key is love. See, another, literally, that happened, one of our kids came to me and said, I don't get 20% of your time. I said, what are you talking about? He said, you have 5 children, which you each get 20%. And I said to him, your brother's driving us nuts, so he gets 40. So remember, the opposite of love is rejection and indifference. So if you raise hell, you get more attention. It feels better than none. But I also always admired this young man, our son, for coming up to me and saying, I don't get 20% of your time. See, he could have sat in his bedroom depressed saying, my parents don't love me as much as my brother. But he spoke up. And boy, I give him a lot of credit for that.